There we go. 1 minute.
Are you ready to admit all, Jamil?
I am.
Okay. We should be good to start.
Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On a rainy day, I'd like to open the Birmingham City Commission of October 19, 2020 to order. Could you please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
and to the
And
republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty
and justice for all.
Justice for all.
This evening, before we take our roll call, we have a little announcement as things change a little bit in order for us to comply with the statute. And I'll let Mr. Valentine just brief you in on when the clerk calls your name, there's just additional announcement that you have to make on what city and state that you're in via Zoom. And with that, I'll give the floor to Mr. Valentine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you noted, there is a new requirement that's in effect. So last time we met, we kind of erred on the side of caution with regard to the status of the virtual meeting authority in the state of Michigan, and we had canceled that meeting. Subsequent to that, on Friday of last week, the governor had signed Senate Bill 1108, which allowed for the continuation of virtual meetings by legislation of the state of Michigan. One of the caveats that's in this bill that's new, that we will make sure we want to comply with, is the provision that if any member attending remotely of the public body must declare the city and state that they're in for purposes of the meeting and to be compliant with the statute. So as we do the roll call this evening, I would just recommend that as you acknowledge your attendance, you just simply state the city and state that you're in for the record. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Can you repeat that, Mayor Boutros?
Sure. Can you hear me now, Alex?
Yeah, you were on mute.
I please ask you to do the roll call, and I just reminded the commission for the third time that to mention the city and state when they call their name.
Mayor Boutros,
Here in the state of, in the city of Birmingham, Michigan.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Commissioner Baylor,
Here in beautiful Birmingham, Michigan.
Commissioner Hoff,
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Commissioner Host,
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Commissioner Nikita,
I hate to break the streak, but I'm here and I'm in Indianapolis and specifically in Westfield, Indiana.
Commissioner Sherman,
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Thank you, Alex. With that, we continue our business. We go next to proclamations, congratulatory resolutions, awards, appointment, resignation, and confirmation. Joe, can you mute me? I think that's what's happening. Can you hear me? Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties. I'll repeat. Item 3 on the agenda is proclamations, congratulatory resolutions, awards, appointments, resignations and confirmations, administration of oath, introduction of guests and announcements. We have a couple announcements tonight. First one, as we mentioned in the several last few meetings, as the clerk's office would like to remind voters to turn in an absentee ballot application if they wish to vote by mail for the November 3rd, 2020 general election. Please return your absentee ballot to the clerk's office as soon as possible via Dropbox or mail. Return postage for absentee ballot has been covered by the city for this election. To review your specific voting information and preview your ballot, you can visit michigan.gov/vote. The online and mail voter registration deadline is October 19, which is today. After October 19, which is after today, new voters must register in person at the clerk's office. I guess this message was from our last meeting, but we repeated it again, and I apologize for the date, but it is tonight, today. And one important announcement, our tradition is to always acknowledge commissioner birthdays, and we have Commissioner Sherman's birthday. And also part of our tradition, we sing happy birthday for the candidate. And Commissioner Sherman, we'd like to sing you a happy birthday, and I tuned my voice for tonight for you.
Excellent.
All right, please join me in singing happy birthday. Happy birthday
To you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Sherman. Happy birthday to you.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, we wish you, go ahead.
It was definitely in a different tune than when we're together.
We wish you many happy and healthy years to come your way, Commissioner Sherman. All the best.
Yeah.
With that, we go to our next item on the agenda. It's for open to the public for matters not on the agenda. Our public comments. Here we go. Let's see. Do we see any hand? Any public comments for matters not on the agenda?
I'll make, oh, never mind. I'll wait till the city manager discussion.
Okay. Seeing none, we move forward to our next item, our consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion and approved by a roll call vote. There'll be no separate discussion of the items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered under the last item of new business. Commissioners, would you like to remove any item? Commissioner Sherman.
I will be abstaining from item A as I was absent.
Okay. Any other commissioner would like to remove any item? Commissioner Hoff.
Item A and item N, like in nickel.
And item A and N, all right?
N,
Yes, as in Nancy.
okay.
Any other commissioners would like to remove any item from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Any item from the public would like to remove any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Entertain a motion. Commissioner Sherman.
I'll move the consent agenda excluding items A and N.
Seconded by Commissioner Host. Commissioner Host, you're on silent. Can you unmute yourself, please?
I didn't think I was.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
Second.
Thank you. Alex, did you get that?
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. Can we please take the roll call?
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Commissioners, would you like to go through that, Commissioner Hoff, as we're,
Yes, it won't take long.
go ahead, please.
right.
Let's discuss item A by Commissioner Hoff.
Item A, the minutes in the meeting of September 21st. On page 8 of the minutes, there's reference to a motion made by Commissioner Host and second by Commissioner Baller. On page 7, on page 8, it says Commissioner Host withdrew the motion and Commissioner Baller withdrew the second. Then immediately following, it says, it repeats again the motion by Commissioner Host and seconded by Commissioner Baller. It seems to me that I don't quite recall how that went, but it's a little confusing to have the exact same motion made twice and withdrawn once.
I respond.
Commissioner Host, go ahead.
The original motion, Commissioner Hoff, was too generic, and yet the actual motion doesn't state, current noise ordinances with regard to the neighborhoods. Namely, noise can be non-vehicle, vehicular, non-vehicular, and that's what we're discussing tonight, versus vehicular and non.
In looking it over, I see the difference. It doesn't say anything about vehicular. The difference is the first motion was made, and it was to direct staff to provide reports on noise ordinances. That motion was withdrawn by Commissioner Host and Commissioner Baller, and a new motion was immediately made to direct staff to provide a report of current noise ordinances. So the word current was added. That's where I think the difference is. Now, I didn't see that before, but in looking at this again, I think the word current was added, and that's why the first one was withdrawn and the second one adds the word current. Does anyone have any recollection different than that? Let's assume that's the correction. Moving along, on page 6, under public engagement platforms, in paragraph 3, second from last sentence, it states that management intern Fairburn replied that departments would manage on a project basis, noting that other cities did not hire, would take approximately 6 to 10 weeks from purchase to implementation. I'm not clear in what that means, noting that other cities did not hire.
We'll go back and listen to the tape.
Commissioner Hoff, I suggest that we go back to the tape and we'll listen to that. As Alex, can we do that, please?
Yeah, I'll review the tapes and make corrections as needed.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Baller has a comment on that?
Yeah, I can just quickly say that she was responding to a question from me, and I had asked if they had hired people specifically to manage the platform. So I believe that a couple of words were left out, that other cities did not hire people specifically to handle that platform, and that it would take approximately 6 to 10 weeks.
Okay. I think that perhaps that's correct, Commissioner Bauer. Words were left out, and that's why it doesn't make sense. So with that correction, and with my understanding of the motion with the word current added, I will move acceptance of the commission minutes of September 21st, noting the abstention of Commissioner Sherman.
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Long. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Baller,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman abstains. Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Thank you, Alex. With that, we go to item N, pulled by Commissioner Hoff. Go ahead, Commissioner Hoff, please.
N is on the Brownfield Consulting contract.
Yes.
And I have two questions on this. We are being asked to approve a consulting contract with ASTI Environmental. And I see that previously AKT Peerless was our contractor on that. I have two questions. What did the prior consultant, AKT Peerless, charge the city? Because now I see that we are being charged between $3,000 to $5,000 per project. And my second question is, I would like an update on current brownfield projects. What do we have in the works?
I'll give the floor to Mr. Valentine. Commissioner Hoff, 1 second, please. All yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item before you is the replacement of the consultant that we had used previously for brownfield redevelopment reviews. Using AKT Peerless over the years, we had found that they had started doing additional work for some of the brownfield projects that were coming before us. So we wanted to change firms and have more of an independent firm doing the work on our behalf. So we're recommending that we switch over to ASTI for that work. The AKT Peerless, since 2005, we've paid them approximately $89,000 for their services. And that work is to basically review the brownfield plans in conjunction with the Brownfield Authority and provide recommendations to the authority in moving forward with the reimbursement requests that are reviewed. The two current projects that we have pending right now that are not finalized are the Pearl, which is on the corner of just south of Oak on Old Woodward, and then also the project, the Art Van headquarters location, which is on Oak and Woodward, are the two brownfields that are currently open at the moment.
May I ask a follow-up question?
You may. Go ahead, Commissioner Hoff.
So the 89,000 for services, that was a lot more than just one or two projects. That was helping to establish the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority Board. Is that correct?
No, I believe these are for the reviews of the brownfield requests that came before the board. And I want to say we probably had close to 10 during that period. And the levels of reimbursement vary per project. So the amount of work varies per project as well.
Okay. With that explanation, I will move the suggested resolution to authorize the city manager to sign on behalf of the city.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Nikita. Thank you. Any comment from the public on it? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll, please?
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Baller,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Bingham. With that, we'll go to our next item on the agenda, unfinished business. We have none. New business. We have item A. Item A, we have resolution adopting and supporting the grant applications made to the Michigan State Historic Preservation Office for the following. One is reimbursement grant application for $15,000 to develop updated historic design guidelines with an emphasis on new and emerging materials. And number two is a reimbursement grant application for $8,000 to conduct a reconnaissance level survey of the Little San Francisco neighborhood. With that, I see Mr. Nicholas Dupius ready to give us some background. Yes, we need to unmute him, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks
Yes.
for unmute. All right, so that is me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, commissioners, everyone. Hi, hope you've been well. should I wait for Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to note that in the materials, it appears that Mr. Host has signed a petition, or Commissioner Host has signed a petition in favor of this. And I would ask the city attorney whether that creates a conflict situation that he needs to either disclose or recuse himself from.
My response is disclosure is appropriate, but recusal is not necessarily.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify since his name was there.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Host.
I want to share with you, my neighbor wrote down my name. He should have written Laura Host.
Okay.
She owns the property.
Regardless, Commissioner Host, it's more of a, you don't have to recuse, as we said, as long as we're aware of the situation. Thank you so much. With that, I think, would that conclude your question, Mr. Sherman?
That was it. I just wanted clarity for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll bring it back to our staff. Mr. Nicholas Dupuis, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks, Commissioner Sherman. So we have what we feel is a tremendous opportunity here to continue Birmingham's nearly half a century effort to preserve and protect our historic resources, and it's in the form of 2 certified local government applications for the upcoming fiscal year 2021. This grant opportunity, it was made available by the State Historic Preservation Office to its active certified local governments in good standing in July of this year. Those funds were available for education, identification, community-based planning, registration, or rehabilitation activities. So we decided to prepare 2 applications. One, the aforementioned, or excuse me, as Mayor Boutros mentioned, a proposal for a fresh, comprehensive set of historic design guidelines with an emphasis on new and emerging materials. And 2, a proposal for a reconnaissance level survey of what we're calling for now the Little San Francisco neighborhood. As you're aware, the Historic District Commission had sought assistance for the same projects in the Community Partnership Program through the State Historic Preservation Office. These projects were first on our 2020 action list. They were ultimately not selected, so we're pleased to have this opportunity in the form of the CLG grant program to go for those again. This round of CLG grant funding, it's an expense reimbursement program, so there is no local match required. However, should the grant application or applications be approved by the SHPO, the city will be expected to incur the expenditures for the project prior to the work being completed. When the work is completed, the city would then submit all eligible expenditures up to the approved grant amount for the reimbursement after SHPO acceptance of the project and the final documentation. So at this time, the Planning Division is seeking support for both grant applications as submitted in the form of approval of the attached resolutions. As always, happy to answer questions, and Mayor Boutros.
Thank you, Mr. Dupuis. And with that, we'll open it to question for commissioners. Commissioner Hoff, she has a question for you.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I see I'm all in favor of any type of historic restoration and these types of studies, and I definitely support the grant applications. But my questions are, number one, the first one is for $15,000 and the second for $8,000. And I see letters in our packets from a company called Beckett and Rader. And so it looks to me like those are the 2 companies that you anticipate hiring to do the work and to receive the proceeds of the grants if they are approved. Is that correct?
Not entirely. So those are 2 letters. They're supposed to be more of a somewhat of a quote that I based the application work description off of. So I reached out to several historical preservation and planning firms, architectural firms, probably about 10 or so. Most of them were able to give me a range in terms of what these types of projects would cost. But these two particular firms, it's actually two they would like to team up, Preservation Forward and, as you said, Beckett and Rader. They were kind enough to furnish me a quote to use to justify the work description portion of the grant application. So it's still going to be going out for competitive bids and the whole shebang, if you will, but they were just the ones that were kind enough to give me a formal quote.
Go ahead, you may continue, Commissioner Hall.
My concern is we have a letter in our packet from Leslie Mio, who's the president of Friends of the Birmingham Museum. And in her letter, she said the city has knowledgeable personnel that can effectively utilize grant funds to complete this study to determine next steps toward preserving the neighborhood. This is in specific reference to Little San Francisco. So if the city has knowledgeable personnel, why would we be paying $8,000 to this firm?
So my answer to that is because we've got a very new historical district study committee. That's the public body that would do something like this, a reconnaissance level survey. I thought it would be a very valuable opportunity to have a professional company come in and work with us as in city staff, but also the historic district study committee to train them on the Michigan Above Ground Architectural Survey Manual, the processes, how to take the photographs. So really just using this opportunity to as a training exercise for HDSC.
I see. And is the 8,000 and the 15,000 simply to do the research or to implement anything that is researched?
The idea would be for them, in both cases, the design guidelines is to produce a final document of updated design guidelines for us to use moving forward in our implementation of historical preservation in the city. And the reconnaissance level survey, again, would be a final document which we would use to then consider the possibility for an intensive level survey, which is the next step in determining what properties we feel would be eligible for historical designation.
Has Little San Francisco been designated a local historic district?
Not at this time. Yeah, that's the ultimate. Well, that's what we'd like to study. And this is the first step. This would be the first step.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other question? I see Mr. Valentine raising his hand. The floor is yours, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge one point in the report with regard to the designation, the plan to study the designation of the Little San Francisco neighborhood. When this was presented to my office 2 days before the application deadline, I did have some concern with regard to the timing and the ability to notify the residents within that neighborhood so that they had some input into this process. I know it went before the HDSC, but I think in normal course, we would have some discussion with the residents in the neighborhood prior to moving forward with a plan to study that neighborhood. So I just wanted to acknowledge the process we're in is a little unusual in the sense that the timeline to get the application was October 1st, and the submittal of the materials was provided at a very short interval prior to that. So I agreed to allow them to submit the plan for the deadline in the application process. But I thought it was important to have some conversation here this evening in regards to that timeline and whether the commission's comfortable in moving forward without having any discussion with the residents in that neighborhood prior to moving forward. You have the ability, should you decide, to withdraw this application without any impact going up to, I believe, the middle or end of March of 2021. But if you wanted to make that decision, I wanted you to know that that is a decision that you have this evening in the event that you share that concern or you feel that additional information and communication with the neighborhood is required. And we could also always resubmit in a subsequent year. But I didn't want to let that provision or that paragraph go unnoted this evening in the event you move forward, just so that you're aware of the process that was followed to get us here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Other Commissioner Baller?
Yeah, I have two questions. Assuming the grant is approved, does that require us to go ahead with it? That's my first question. Or could we back out and not do it?
Nick, you want to answer that?
Sure. So if we were to be chosen for that specific project, and it's in May of 2021 when we would be selected, I am certain, although I haven't asked specifically, that we can say no. Essentially, we could decline.
Okay. My second question is there any circumstance that could grow out of this under which a property owner, under which historic designation could be imposed upon a property owner?
No, this level of survey, which again, I'll say it's a reconnaissance level survey.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. That's not my question. My question is if there is any circumstance that could flow from this. In other words, let's say eventually, after several different steps, Little San Francisco is declared historic. At any point, could a property owner, could historic designation be imposed upon a property owner without their consent?
Thank you.
I have to admit that it would be my first time doing something like this. I do not think that we impose those types of things. I think it's more of an opt-in.
But you're not sure? That's
correct.
Okay. Personally, I'd like an answer to that question at some point.
Sure. No problem.
I have no problem moving forward, but depending on the answer to that question.
No problem.
Commissioner Nikita, go ahead.
I have concerns about the restriction option here. As an architect that does a lot of historic renovation, restoration, adaptive reuse, I've worked with SHPA locally, nationally, through the state. I have a lot of experience in this area. I've done dozens of projects that involve historic properties. So I'm very sensitive to this, to the utilization of historic resources and moving those things forward and their value to the community. So it's absolutely a good idea to recognize that. But at the same time, having a lot of experience on this commission, as well as with the planning board, I know very well of the concerns of residents and homeowners and property owners and their awareness and or potential to be connected to any type of historic designation that may restrict their ability to do whatever it happens to be on their property. The fact that you can't answer that question is concerning to me, I think. One of the issues here is to recognize that at least my guess here, based on what I'm given here, the information is that I'm not sure that we've thoroughly presented this, going back to what the city manager had mentioned, to the particular neighborhood owners. And I personally feel like they should be well informed of what we're considering and the importance and potential of what it is, both in terms of the value to the community as a historic resources in these potential structures or what have you, that their value to the community historically, but also the recognition of what that means to them as a property owner. So I'm a bit concerned about the cart before the horse here. I guess I'm not sure that that we've fully recognized the details, and I think that particular question of whether or not there would be any imposition, I think we need to answer that, and we need to make sure that the community, of which there are dozens of homes, I think, that are potentially historic here, how that would factor in. So I guess clarity on that is very important before I'm comfortable moving forward on this.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nikita. I see Mr. Dupuy's hands up. Go ahead, Nicholas Dupuy. Would you go ahead?
Yeah, very good comments, and I am happy to provide any clarification that anyone asks for, no doubt. But I do want to make, to attempt to make very clear that this reconnaissance level survey is a very, very, very preliminary step. It's really kind of a high level view of the neighborhood. This body, the city commission, would ultimately have the decision, the ultimate decision later down in the line if the survey product were to find several potential resources in the neighborhood, and if they were to recommend further study, that is an intensive level survey, this body would have the ultimate decision whether or not to move forward. It would not just go flying through, it would definitely come back. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Mr. Dupuy, I do have a similar concerns. I just don't want to make sure, I'm not sure if we should go ahead and spend the money, then find out the answer. I do have very similar concern, and as Commissioner Baller and Nikita had mentioned, I'm all for historical, we're all for preservations, we're all for studies and see how can we preserve that, but that has to be not imposed on a resident. It really, to me, it's just, again, I want to repeat the same sentence. Don't want to put the cart in front of the horse if we don't know the answer. I'm in full support of the grant if we know the answer. But Commissioner Hoff, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to make two comments. First of all, we do have in our packet a letter from a Mr. Neil Fitchenberg in that area, and he has talked to several of the residents, and they are all in favor, the ones that he refers to, received confirmation of support for the survey. This is only the survey. This is not declaring anything historical. This is a survey, as Nick said. Secondly, to my recollection, we have other historic districts in the city that individual property owners do not have to declare their property a historic property, but they may have the home may be in a historic district. So I don't know if there are different regulations, but it seems to me that in the past, some homes are declared historic properties as requested by the property owner. Others are not and are located in historic districts, but because they are not declared historic properties, they have a lot more flexibility.
I suggest if we can table this item till we have more information, Mr. Dupuy, and we can bring it back with the answers that you might have for us that you don't have tonight.
Okay, and just to be clear, that's more of a, I'll say, a timetable for what this project would start, and in the end, if any designations would be imposed. Does that sound about right?
Sure. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead.
I would add to that something along the lines of what type of communication will you have with the neighborhood to inform the residents that this project is anticipated? While we're talking about this as a preliminary, it's a small step, it's an overview. It's also a step. It's a step in a direction. And once you start moving in a particular direction, as we all know, government tends to move in that direction. And I think that the residents need to be aware when we're starting, not when we're, oh, by the way, we're declaring this to be a historic district. And yeah, you weren't paying attention during that time period, but sorry, all these things occurred. So I think we have to go above and beyond to make sure, since property rights could be affected, that each of the residents in that neighborhood are aware of what's going on.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. Would you like to say something, Joe? Commissioner Baller?
Yeah, does this mean that you are not going to be able to get this grant if we don't buy in tonight?
No.
Okay.
I've got some time still.
Okay.
So I think there's two resolutions here, one regarding the design guidelines and one regarding the reconnaissance survey. Would it be appropriate to move the first suggested resolution regarding design guidelines.
It's fair. I mean, if. the
Okay, I'll make that motion to move things along.
Go ahead.
I'll move it. It's long. You don't want me to read the whole thing, do you?
No,
Okay.
but be specific on what the item, if you don't mind, Commissioner Baller.
I'm sorry, I don't have the page in front of me, but it's the resolution regarding the grant application for design guidelines.
The $15,000.
There it is. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fiscal year 21 certified local government grant application, historic design guidelines 2020, and then it goes on whereas.
Thank you. That's clear. Commissioner Host, are you seconding that? You're muted. We cannot hear you. I can read your lips, but I cannot hear you.
Yes, second. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, welcome. And then any further discussion or comments on the motion from the commission? I see none. Did I lose Commissioner Hoff? I don't see her. Oh, Commissioner Nikita, go ahead.
I would just say, I don't have an issue with moving forward on the one resolution. I think the concerns that have been brought up by a number of commissioners are referencing the second item. So the first item, I think, is fine.
All right, good enough. Any other comment on the motion from the commission? Any other comment on the motion from the public? I see one hand. Mr. Hanky, the floor is yours. Please state your name for the record and your address.
John Hanky, 724 Bates. Thank you, commissioners. As the head of both the Design Review Board and the HDC, I can tell you Nick has put a tremendous amount of effort into trying to obtain these two grants for us. There is absolutely no assurance we will get either one of them, but he has certainly put together a package that we hope will succeed in either one or both of those. Having listened to your concerns with respect to the San Francisco district, if you read the grant application, all this is an initial step and an investigation as to whether or not there are historic resources that potentially could be designated by the homeowner. We have, as many of you know, gone through the histrionics of trying to have the commission designate those properties, which has not gone well. It's not our intention on the HDC to do that. It's our intention on the HDC to educate the people of the potential resource that they possess and whether or not they want to make that election. If you've read the grant packages, there is nothing, and I can back up Nick on this, he was a little hesitant. There is nothing that says there's a mandate to the city commission or a mandate from SHPO that once a particular property or properties fall under a potential historic designation, that there's a mandate that that will be designated as such. This is a survey. So I would suggest, even given your comments, we give Nick the go-ahead on both of these programs. With respect to the design review guidelines, it looks like we're going to pass them. And I would only tell the commission that I expect in 2021 that there are items that have been presented to us in developments downtown. We are going to need those guidelines, and the hope is that Nick's application has done a good enough job for us to be able to get that grant.
Thank you, Mr. Hanky. Any other comments on the motion has been made by the public? You know, I normally go for the roll call immediately, but I want to give it another shot to the commission should they reconsider what Mr. Hanky, or we can proceed tonight with this, and as we have a meeting next Monday, if you're comfortable enough to pretty much confirm and also get us more clarification on the questions and the concern that we had. It's only 1 week, as you mentioned, Mr. Dupuy, that also it's not gonna put us behind or anything or affect the result of tonight vote, correct?
As far as I understand, that's correct. I've been
Okay.
in constant contact with them about this, so they're well aware.
Thank
And I
you.
have not been given any inclination that this is
Yeah,
going to be
thank
detrimental.
Thank you, and I appreciate really Mr. Hankey's knowledge on this matter. It put us into more comfort, but I think I'll leave it up to the commission. We have a motion seconded. Should we go for the roll call? And then we'll bring it back. The item 2 for San Francisco on the next meeting. I'm just asking the commission if that's the desire they want to go with. Yes, Commissioner Ball. Commissioner
Yeah,
Ball.
these are two separate resolutions, Mayor, so I suggest we vote on this one.
Right,
And then,
let's
and then if someone wants to move the second one, they can. If they don't, they won't. For me, I'll just tell you, I have no problem moving the second one as well. I don't think it's a freight train that can't be stopped. But on the other hand, if we can get an answer, more clarity by the next meeting, and it's not going to affect it, that's okay too. But there's separate resolutions. And
okay.
I think we should just vote on this and move on.
Why don't we do the roll call on this one as we, oh, I see a hand. Commissioner Hoff, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had some technical problem and I lost you, so I don't know what the motions are. So I would appreciate before the vote that the motions be read so I know what I'm voting on.
Would Ms. Bingham call, would the clerk please repeat?
Commissioner Baylor moved new business item A, the first part of the resolution, the reimbursement grant application for $15,000 to develop updated historic design guidelines with an emphasis on new and emerging materials. So just the first part of new business A is what is on the table, seconded by Commissioner Host.
And that's what we're voting on, Commissioner Hoff, right now.
Thank you.
All right. So will the clerk please call the roll on that, please?
Commissioner Baylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
Yes.
Mayor Boutros.
Yes, thank you. With that, I would entertain another motion should the commission want to do the motion separate for item 2. If not, we just move on. Commissioner Nikita, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would prefer waiting on this until we get a little bit more information. I have 3 points of concern regarding this. One is I don't think we want to submit for a grant, get selected for the grant or awarded, and then deny the grant. That's not a good situation, and it would likely turn us in a bad situation if we wanted to resubmit for a second grant. So I don't suggest going for a grant unless we're sure that we want to keep it, because I think it may hurt our chances going forward. Second thing is I would say that, again, one of my primary concerns is the awareness of the residents in this area about what we're anticipating. And again, having a lot of experience in this area, even the survey going forward without all of the residents that may be affected, that not attempting to get in front of them with clarity as to what that is concerns me. I know there are a handful of people that signed the document that we have in our packet, but I believe it was only a few people. And I don't know, I think there's dozens of homes in there that are affected. So I'm concerned about the broader view on that and actually connecting to some of those people even before we do this work, because I think after the fact, you lose the credibility of having done it without anybody knowing about it. The third thing I would say is the comment about Bates Street, I believe, is the historic district that we have. Granted, there are historic houses, designated houses that are restricted, and they're usually designated by the homeowner, and that's fine. But in the case of Bates Street, which is a designated district, there are notable restrictions to any alteration of those homes. And as you may recall, some of the more seasoned commissioners here that have dealt with some of those particular projects, they came in front of us, and there's been quite a few restrictions as to what you can and can't do on those properties in the Bates Street Historic District. So with that in mind, it's not something to take lightly. We have to recognize the restrictions. And as Commissioner Hoff said, they are restrictions, but there are allowances to do certain things. But clearly, as we know, there are notable restrictions. So I just would say that we want to be as clear as possible on this before we move forward on this grant application. And I just bring that up before we move. I'd be in favor of pushing this off, getting more clarity on those items as well as anything else, and then moving it forward or not once we have those points.
Thank you, Commissioner Nikita. Commissioner Hoff, go ahead with your comment, please.
I can agree with getting additional information, but from my understanding, the grant applications have already been submitted because we had an October 1st deadline. So it is my understanding that the city of Birmingham submitted applications for these two grants. Now, whether we use it or not is another question, but am I correct? Did we submit them?
That is correct, Commissioner Hoff. Commissioner Baller?
Yeah, I don't hear a motion. Can we move on?
Commissioners, I would like to give the floor for each person if they wish to speak on this matter. If not, we're going to move on. I see no comments, so then we'll move on to the next item. And with that, item B under new business, we have a city manager recruitment process. For those that may not know, our city manager will be leaving at the end of this year following 24 years with the city. We regret his decision, but support his desire to explore new opportunities. As a result, we are faced with the need to fill the position of city manager, and we'll review that process this evening. And I will let Mr. Valentine had options and a small presentation for us on that process. The floor is yours, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As noted, I will be completing my 24th year of service and my career here in Birmingham in January of 2021. And looking ahead, I decided to pursue some new opportunities. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve this community over the last 24 years. But looking ahead and having another 20 years of service, I'm interested to see what's out there in terms of some new opportunities. So I have outlined for you this evening an approach that you can consider in moving forward to fill this vacancy, which will occur January 1st. There are several opportunities that are available to the commission, which I'll walk through this evening. And then we can answer any questions that are, go through any of those in more detail. To begin, the opportunity to fill this position does reside with the City Commission. The opportunity and the process by which you use is entirely up to you. There are some basic...
I'm sorry. Mr. Mayor, would you mind muting your microphone? We're getting some feedback from the two mics that are both open.
Mine is closed.
Okay, how's this?
Much better.
Better? Okay. So I'll walk through the outline that I prepared for you this evening in terms of some consideration options for you. There are several. Certainly to start off with, you have the opportunity to select an internal candidate, which was done when I was appointed back in 2014, if you feel that there are candidates available to fill the position from within. As you know, we are absent an assistant at this point. We've failed to develop that position into a successionary type role, but there are other options. The commission can select from an external candidate if they feel there's one qualified external candidate. Additionally, there's a process that can be implemented to move forward, which has various forms. The commission can direct the administration to conduct a recruitment in-house and provide qualified candidates for consideration to the City Commission. That's not that normal, but it is available to you. Additionally, the commission can direct the administration to present a list of professional recruitment firms for the commission to consider for administering a recruitment process. That recruitment process would constitute kind of a turnkey operation for the commission, which essentially would involve establishing a position assessment and profile. That would be with engaging with the commission, members of staff, stakeholders in the community, and identifying a position recruitment from those meetings. Then coming back to the commission to validate that position statement, and then initiating a recruitment based off of that, and then coming back to the commission, soliciting applicants, receiving those applications, vetting those applications, and then coming back to the commission with a short list of applicants. At that point, that would be administered by the consulting firm. Now, there's two ways to do that in terms of identifying a consulting firm. You'd have the opportunity to look at a group of firms that predominantly do work in the state of Michigan in the municipal arena, and we do have a list of names we could present to you. You also have the ability to issue an RFP for consulting services, which could go nationwide. And then you could make the determination at that point in which firms you'd want to consider to discuss, to talk with. So timing in terms of moving forward under these scenarios. Obviously, the shortest time frame would be having somebody internal or external that you would want to engage with, and then you could move forward in a relatively quick time frame. If you went the process of engaging with the consultant, obviously that time frame gets lengthened. On average, you're probably looking about 4 to 5 months. Could be a little bit longer depending on how involved you make the process. But that gives you an idea of what would be involved. And I've laid out on page 2 basically a view of how that process would look in terms of what would happen through each week of that process. Now, understanding that my tenure will be done the end of December, you may have a bit of an overlap. In the event that that happens, you may wish to appoint an interim manager so you have the opportunity to avoid any gaps and continue with a seamless transition. If you decide to do that, I had recommended Chief Clemens, who obviously has filled in for me in the past during times I'd be out of town and such. And given his 35 years of service with the city, his extensive knowledge with labor relations and his leadership of the operation and the police department, and his ability to manage large budgets, I think he would be a strong candidate for you, but certainly that's up to the discretion of the commission. So moving forward this evening, you have some opportunities. I did lay out as well in the agenda packet the full recruitment process, which is kind of a guideline from the ICMA for recruiting professional managers that kind of outlines this in a little bit more detail that you have the ability to review. And that kind of outlines the basics of that process. I know in this process, putting this together, that we did have a communication from a former manager that was interested in having some discussion on this. And I'll leave that to Mayor Boutros to talk about that further. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. I take this moment, I also would like to acknowledge that I've been contacted by a former city manager, Mr. Tom Marcus, with interest in this position. At this time, I'd like to hear from the commission on their interest to pursue further discussion on Mr. Marcus, and also leave it the discussion to further question on the process for me or for Mr. Valentine or for our city attorney, whatever you wish to discuss further. Mayor Pro Tem Long, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Boutros. So the question of how we move forward as a city is a really important one. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging again the enormous contributions that Joe Valentine has made in his nearly 25 years with the city and his last 6 years as city manager. And I know that we all feel that his resignation is certainly a loss, but with most changes, it's also an opportunity. And in his normal and really thorough way, Joe provided us with this roadmap for this opportunity when he included the International City County Management Association recruitment guidelines in our packet this evening. I've read all of it, and it's an excellent overview of the process. But when reading it, I noted the following guidance, which I'd like to read from the first paragraph of section 3, which says, quote, "The governing body should initiate the recruitment process immediately after the official decision has been made regarding resignation, retirement, or termination. Failure to do so can potentially generate rumors within a community by various interested parties who may attempt to exert pressures on members to quickly fill the vacancy. The members of the governing body must bear in mind that an impulsive response to this pressure can be divisive for them and can damage their credibility. They must take charge of the recruitment and determine the process that will be used to recruit and select the best administrator, and then make that decision clear to all concerned." So I think that bearing that in mind and prudently acknowledging Mr. Marcus's interest in the city manager position, as well as honoring our tradition of following deliberate processes, I think it might be prudent to suggest that we proceed on 2 parallel tracks in order to best serve the city. Thus, I would like to make a motion that would direct the administration to present a list of professional recruitment firms to the commission to consider for administering a recruitment process, which is option 4 in the list Joe just went over, and also invite Mr. Marcus for an interview and discussion with the commission to explore his interest in the city manager position.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Long and seconded by Commissioner Host. But Mayor Pro Tem, just to be clear, did you just make a motion, and I will leave it to the commission to comment further, that you want 2 things here? Number 4, which is the option number 4, and then also with that, pursue further discussion with Mr. Marcus?
Yes, I'm making a motion that we don't give up on the recruitment process for number 4, but also certainly invite Mr. Marcus to let us know of his interest in the city manager position. I'd love to have an opportunity to speak to him about, it's been 10 years for him and for us, and I think that a conversation would be warranted.
Okay, commissioners, further discussion on Commissioner Hoff?
Yes, first, I want to express my sincere sadness at Joe Valentine leaving. I think he has served us extremely well, and we're not going to get much better. I think that his dedication and integrity are beyond reproach. So I am very sad about this. That's first. Secondly, this motion was made by 2 people who have served on the commission less than 1 year. So they have no experience with hiring a new city manager, with working with different city managers, and the others of us who have been on for a while, as well as many members of the public who have submitted letters and who are knowledgeable, have been through this process. The firms that are available, we looked at previously and came up with the best decision that we could when we were looking for a new city manager when Mr. Marcus left. And the results were not very satisfying. It was a national search. We spent thousands of dollars. We hired someone from Ferndale, Michigan, who lasted 3 years. And so it is not easy to find a new city manager. All we have to do is look at the news, what's going on in surrounding communities in the Detroit metro area with city managers. And so I think it's very difficult. That doesn't mean that I don't think we can't find someone. I think Birmingham is a plum community, and we will have applicants. I think the opportunity that Mr. Marcus has offered us is such a unique opportunity that I would prefer that we talk to him first before we start this national search process, which again is costly, it's time consuming, and we don't know what results we're going to get. So my opinion is to talk to Mr. Marcus first. He was a city manager here for many years. Many people in our community know him, if not most, know him. And the city has progressed very positively. So that would be my preference. Also, we have received, according to my record keeping, at least 25 communications from residents, plus numerous verbal communications that we don't have documented. And of them, there was only one negative. Of the ones in our packet, there was one negative and one who questioned the terms of a re-engagement of Mr. Marcus. Well, when you get that kind of response, we haven't had that kind of response on many of the issues that have faced this commission. It seems to me there is a very positive outpouring of support for at least talking to Mr. Marcus first. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Comments from the commissioners, please? Commissioner Baller?
Yes, I believe the motion was to have this commission direct the administration to present a list of professional recruitment firms. That's all, not to necessarily begin a recruitment process. So just wanted to clarify that. That's what I heard Mayor Pro Tem Long say. And so, I mean, I would support that. I think it makes sense to talk to Mr. Marcus. It makes sense to get a list of
Okay. Got a motion? Second, comments on the motion? Commissioner Host?
Just in responding to Commissioner Hoff's nice comments about Joe, thank you, Joe, as well as nice comments about Tom Marcus. Thank you, Tom. I think to do this dual resolution is very important. We are a plum, as Commissioner Hoff has said, and as such, 10 years ago, we didn't have the international search that I would like to think that we should consider, because we are a very desirable community and somebody would be more than willing to relocate here. And I think it'd be nice to talk to Mr. Marcus as well, but I wouldn't want to slow down a process that will hopefully get us someone from outside the state of Michigan possibly to come in and lead us into our future.
Commissioner Sherman?
Thinking back to what we did when Mr. Marcus left, the recruitment process was an interesting event. I think that the motion that was made, being having the administration prepare a list of recruitment firms and at the same time invite Mr. Marcus in, allows us to proceed on potential dual tracks without committing any resources until after we talk to Mr. Marcus. So if Mr. Marcus is available, we have another commission meeting next week. And the one after that is November
9th.
November 9th. So we have 2 commission meetings in very short order. As long as we can have that conversation with him before we commit resources, and understanding that even if we'll get the list of consulting firms that do this recruitment, and then we have to interview them. So that's going to take some time. So I have no problem doing both. I think that's a good way to do it. So
Commissioner Sherman, just to remind you that on November 9th, just for that date, we have 3 public hearings that we postponed for that night. Just an information to us if that's a sufficient time for such an important decision that we can or discussion that we're going to have that night with Mr. Marcus.
Well, what I'm saying then is, let's see what his schedule is.
I suggest, sorry, Commissioner Sherman, if may I continue my comment? I suggest for an item that important like this, a special meeting that we can conduct by itself to have the time to further discuss it with Mr. Marcus. But I'll would like to hear from the rest of the commission on that. But as the motion does not have a certain date, regardless, but we can also have our city manager follow up with us, and then we can guide him to whether we like to do a special meeting or not, or should you decide tonight, we can do it.
Mr. Mayor, what I was actually indicating was there's nothing wrong with running a dual track like that. However, before we decide that we're expending money to hire a consultant, we should complete this one track, but we can be obtaining the names and figuring out which of these firms we're going to interview to make a decision as to whether, if the Marcus track doesn't work, what we're going to do as far as a consultant goes. So as far as the timing, I'm just suggesting that there are meetings coming up or a special meeting, and it would be up to, I believe it would be up to you, Mr. Mayor, to set that time, talking with Mr. Marcus and seeing when he's available.
And I will follow up with Mr. Marcus, and I will follow up with you with the next step. And Commissioner Nikita, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple comments following up. First of all, I would also like to express my deep disappointment and sadness that we will be losing Joe, who has been an extraordinary and exceptional city manager and a very competent part of our community for 24 years, and has served with competence and integrity beyond most people that I'm aware of and who I've worked with. So I've been pleased to have worked with him, and I'm saddened by the fact that he will be leaving us. It's a huge loss for the city. The process going forward, I would say that we want to move as diligently and as competently as possible. I think setting up a meeting with Mr. Marcus, who I've obviously worked with for many years and familiar with, but I'm curious about his current day thoughts relative to where we're at and where we could go. So as soon as we can meet with him, I would concur with the idea of setting it up sooner than later. And I would agree that next week would be great if we can do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Nikita. Any further comment from the commissioner on the motion? Commissioner Hoff.
I have another question. Who
Yes.
will coordinate all of this? Whether we use an outside firm, whether when we contact Mr. Marcus, who is coordinating all of this? Who is the contact within the city? Who is coordinating the search, if there is a search?
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. A very good question in terms of the administration of this. You can obviously assign it to anybody you'd like. Clearly, with regards to providing the information that's been requested this evening, I can certainly get you the names of the firms that do this work. In terms of facilitating the meeting with Mr. Marcus, I believe the mayor has been asked to do that. I can certainly assist him if you'd like me to. However you'd like to proceed. Certainly, I think there's a knowledge base here that I obtain in this area that I can assist with if you wanted me to pursue certain avenues of this, but clearly that's at the direction of the commission.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Definitely, Commissioner Hoff, as I was contacted personally by Mr. Marcus, I would like to pursue the discussion with him on a further meeting. That's easy to do. Further recruitment and process, would like to gain some guidance from city staff, and I would explore every option I could and exhaust every option I have, whether Mr. Valentine directly will give it to me or provide some other staff in the city to go ahead and guide me with that. I'll be more than happy to volunteer and to do so. All right. Any further comment from the commission on the motion? Seeing none. Any comment on the motion from the public, please? I see Mr. Bloom. Go ahead, please state your name for the record, Mr. Bloom. And your
David Bloom. Good evening. I'm calling from Birmingham, Michigan.
All right.
I've known Mr. Marcus a long time. I worked with him to help save the Birmingham Eccentric. He was instrumental in helping to get that off the ground. And I like him as an individual. This is the wrong motion for this city. And I'll say that again. This is the wrong motion for this city. First of all, Mr. Marcus is offering a 5-year term, and we don't know how long his term would last, but this kicks the can down the road. And because of Mr. Marcus's age, we would need to be hiring someone again in the near future. And we like having city managers be here for a long time. Secondly, the letter that we received from Mr. Marcus is arrogant and condescending. Those were the same words used from someone in Lawrence, Kansas City Hall, where he previously worked. For Mr. Marcus to write a letter to Birmingham saying, I will work for you for 5 years and then I'll get to decide if I work anymore, is arrogant and condescending. We've had enough of that in Birmingham, as much as I respect Mr. Marcus. We need to find fresh blood and look and see what we can do. If Mr. Marcus would like to apply as part of and be interviewed as part of a national search, I see nothing wrong with that, and that's fine. But to hire him because it's the easy, safe way out because we've worked with him before is the wrong move. Mr. Marcus also brought us a significant strategic error in Birmingham with the 2016 plan, where we ended up with tons of office space that then generated the need to build more parking at taxpayer expense. So there he had a vision, he led us, and we ended up with this giant elephant of all this office space clogging up our parking decks downtown. So I think we need to take a fresh look. There are plenty of national firms out there. I've already generated a list. And there are companies out in California we can look at. There's companies in Colorado and Florida, in the Midwest. And we live in an awesome place. I'm proud to live here. I'm happy to live here. I don't think there's a commissioner or anyone on this meeting that isn't happy to be here. And we should be proud of that and try and get the best city manager for the long term that we can. And Mr. Marcus is the short, easy, convenient way out. All of you on the commission were elected to make hard decisions. And the hard decision right now is to do the hard work and find a city manager that we can be proud of for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Coulter? On the motion. On the motion, please.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Birmingham is probably going to be one of the most desirable job openings in the Midwest. We're financially stable. We have a strong tax base. We have a great downtown. We have beautiful neighborhoods. And yes, compared to most cities, we have a very professional city commission. It's a very desirable opening. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by not doing a national search. I think Mr. Marcus, to be fair to other candidates, should be part of the search process and not interviewed separately, so we can really judge who the best candidates are for moving the city forward. This is obviously a very attractive opening. Otherwise, before Joe's seat even got cold, Mr. Marcus was knocking on the door as well as organizing support for this job. It's obviously a very good job. I would suggest that we do a search and include Mr. Marcus as one of the candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Any other public? 1 second, Commissioner Host, please, if I need to finish the public.
Andrew Haig would like to speak. He's not.
I see his hand. I see his hand. Thank you so much. Mr. Haig, go ahead, please. Any comment on the motion, please?
Yes, thank you for unmuting. I was having problems with it registering on my end. I wasn't sure if it worked. Anyway, I have 3 points I just want to bring up. Kind of also echoing what Mr. Coulter said.
Mr. Haig, can you please state your name for the record first and your residence, please?
I beg your pardon. Yes, Andrew Haig, 1814 Banbury, Birmingham.
Right. Thanks.
You're welcome. 3 points. The letters that I see attached, I'm rather disappointed that the letter that I sent to all of you on the City Commission is not on there. So to address the point from Commissioner Hoff about there only being one that was not 100% supportive, wrong. Make mine an addition to the one from Diane as well, because I was not 100% supportive, but I gave reasons. So just so it's a point of record, I'd like to read a couple of pertinent points from it that are just relevant to what was being said. I'm not a supporter of a 5-year term for the same reason that Mr. Coulter gave. I think it's a bad deal. And actually, Mr. Coulter and Mr. Bloom, it's a bad deal for the city. We should be looking for a future, not looking backwards. This is a situation where we can build lemonade out of the lemons we've been handed. And by the way, I did express my thanks to Joe separately offline. So just so you know, I did say that. We should look forwards, not backwards. I have nothing that I can say about Mr. Marcus's past because I have no experience with his city management style. But I feel that this is a unique opportunity to move forwards, not backwards. This is a retrograde step. Mr. Marcus's availability that Mr. Sherman or Commissioner Sherman was talking about. If he's that interested, he makes himself available to you. You don't make yourself available to him. Don't let the tail wag the dog, because that's predetermining the situation in my mind. That's not fair for anybody else that would potentially be interested in the position. And last of all, just a point of observation. I thought it was rather rude of Commissioner Hoff to be so denigrating about the new commissioners not having the experience. You had to learn it once as well. So why would you be so uncomplimentary about their ability to evaluate and analyze somebody? You're all smart.
If you don't mind, just keep your comments directly to the motion on the floor, please.
Well, the relative part of that is if you're going to have a motion, everybody's opinion should be treated equally and not preloaded with an opinion that someone is wrong. Because one of the points I put in the letter that I sent to all of you was, if you do not have a unanimous vote, and it must be unanimous, then you are always going to have an element of doubt in what you've done.
Thank you.
You must be unanimous.
Mr. Haig, just for the record, I have not received any email from you personally, but thank you for your comment.
I sent it to every single one of the city commissioners' city commission email addresses. I know I got through to at least a couple of you, and it has been shared with some other people, so I don't know what happened there, but it was sent to everybody. I will resend it to you later, Mayor Boutros.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haig. Any other public comment on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll call?
Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff?
No.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. Okay, with that, we move on to item C under new business is reviewing existing noise regulations. And we have, I think, our planning director, Ms. Eckert, with us. She is. Ms. Ecker, do you have a slide to show? We need to unmute her, please.
Okay, there we go. No, I do not have a slide to show.
All right, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, the commission had asked at a previous meeting for us to bring forward a review of the existing noise ordinances that we have in place in the city. And so that's what I did outline for you in the memo that was in your package. Gave you basically a summary of what the noise ordinances are in place, and then all of the excerpts from the required or from the specific chapters of the city code that deal with noise. I don't know if you want me to go through them all. Oh, in general, though, there are general noise standards which are outlined in Chapter 50, Environment of the City Code, Section 74, which basically sets up noise level standards for daytime use and nighttime use based on commercial or residential uses of property. So that's where your basic noise limitations are. There are exceptions as to some noises that are permitted to go above those limits, and those are for power equipment such as blowers, lawnmowers, chainsaws, etc., and snow removal equipment. So even though it might go over temporarily, it would be permitted on a short-term basis. Then there is another section as well that deals with long-term, frequent, long continued noises that can be problematic even if they don't exceed the daytime or nighttime noise levels. Barking dog, for instance. There's a whole list. Animal control devices, whistling, bird sounds, bells, sirens, etc. So there are some variances that are allowed from the general noise levels. And then there are a couple of locations in the city code where it talks about noise levels from home occupations, noise levels from family daycare centers, particularly if they're clustered close together. But you can't make too much noise so as to disturb a school that's going on, if that's in session. There are noise limits with regards to vendors, ice cream trucks, standard vendors. And then essentially there are two different types of offenses that can result from noise, and that's breach of the peace and a public nuisance. So that's what we have in place currently. I will say that the issue of noise has come up a lot over the last year or two during the master plan discussions and the public input that we had during that, whether it's the charrette, the clinics, the roundtables, et cetera. And the issue particularly seemed to be with regards to power equipment, leaf blowers, lawn equipment going on, all during the day, construction noises from nearby construction sites and so on. So that is something that is also going to be or has been discussed through the draft of the master plan for 2040. It's not going to actually come up with specific ordinance language as to what we may want to put in place, but certainly it does recommend that there may be some additional ordinance language needed for not only noise, but light issues as well, particularly in the neighborhoods. So that's just a summary of what we have currently in place. The city staff does have a sound meter where we can go out. For instance, one time we had a complaint about, it was around Derby Middle School. They got a new generator. The neighbors were saying it was loud. We can go out there with the noise meter and we can actually register what the decibel level is and determine whether or not it's in compliance with the ordinance. So at that particular time, it was kind of loud when it came on, but it only cycled on once every 24 hours for like 5 minutes. And, so there aren't a lot of controls in place for the length and duration of the noise if it exceeds. So that's another area I think that comes up from time to time that you might want to consider. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I think really you just want to discuss where you might want to go with this.
Correct. Thank you, Ms. Ecker. Commissioner Host.
Can I ask, Jana answered my prime question was, do we have a sound meter? How often do we use that sound meter, Jana?
Well, I will say that up in code enforcement, we maybe use it once or twice a year
Not
when we get a complaint. Now, the police department, I don't know if they have their own, but they do go out sometimes. For instance, we had a music complaint from a restaurant, late at night on a Saturday. So they went out and investigated the noise levels there. So I can't comment on how much they get called out on noise, but at least for the daytime stuff, we only get a few noise complaints a year.
Okay, and how do we arrive at these decimal levels that we have? And I'm just going to share with you, in Ann Arbor, they're quite a bit lower.
How did we arrive at them?
Yes.
I don't know. They've been in the ordinance for several decades. They haven't been amended in at least the 18 years I've been here.
Commissioner Butler?
Yeah, I think we should look at these. I don't know, and if there's some agreement among commissioners that this needs review and some updating. I really don't want to get into a long drawn out discussion of it tonight. I have many questions. I don't want to ask them. The main question I want to ask is, what would be the procedure if we said, look, we need to take a look at this? Would we then express our concerns, the commissioner's concerns, which would then go back to the planning board, or what? How would it go? I can tell you, I would want, some of my concerns to be known, or I'd want the opportunity to express them. Whether people actually take them to heart or not is.
Go ahead, Joe.
But what's the process, Jenna, please?
Well, certainly with regards to any changes to the zoning ordinance, our normal process is that the planning board would have a first public hearing, study session, then a public hearing, and make a recommendation to the city commission. But the noise standards are covered in many different chapters of the city code that don't necessarily require a hearing from the planning board. For instance, chapter 26, chapter 50, chapter 74, dealing with offenses. So you could simply give the direction to have us look at it and come up with some different options, and then we could discuss it. And you would set a public hearing at the city commission level. In fact, I don't even know if we set a public hearing. Joe, you might want to weigh in on that. I don't think all ordinance require a public hearing.
Thank you, Secretary. Let me have Mr. Valentine chime in this a little bit. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate Jana's explanation as to the how it works. I guess the real question, though, getting back to your initial question, is what is it we do depends on, I think, the process we follow in terms of what we're looking at. So I know you said you had a lot of questions. I think if you're going to evaluate an ordinance to make an assessment of any potential changes, we want to have some problem definition to assess what it is we want to identify in the ordinance that may be faulty or in question. So having some more clarity as to what the issue is in the ordinance, I think can help drive that process forward in terms of how we want to study it before, how we move forward, what it is that we want to look at. What are the deficiencies that have been noted or are in question, and how do we want to try to address those, study those, research those, and provide some solutions to those concerns? So I think initially you want to do some problem definition in terms of what the issues with the ordinance are. If in fact there's concern with the levels of the decibel readings, which are in the ordinance, and I believe that there's some chart that'll identify, what's normal for decibel readings, and then you make an assessment as to what level of comfort you're good with in the community for such things. And I think you'd be surprised how high some of those basic operations in the community are in terms of their decibel readings. So some education might be helpful if you identify that, for example, as a specific concern of being the decibel level that's identified in the ordinance. If there's other things that I know in the past you've talked about blowers and having concerns with blowers in residential areas, if that's a specific concern, I think you'd want to have some research in terms of what the alternatives to that could look like and what the concerns could be in moving forward in that direction. So I just think having some additional discussion on the problems with the ordinance would be helpful as we move forward. Then the process of how we get there is what Ms. Eckert just explained to you.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine.
Can I follow up with
Go ahead. Go ahead.
comment? I mean, I'm looking at the clock. It's 9 o'clock. I don't know whether we want to engage in that discussion tonight, or we want to set it aside, do a little more research. I mean, I could go either way. When I say it's 9 o'clock, I'm suggesting it's not really that late, and we don't have that much more on the agenda. I mean, but I'm not going to start that conversation. If the commission, if other commissioners want to have that conversation, I'm happy to take part.
Let's hear from
Otherwise,
Commissioner Nikita. Thank you, Commissioner Baller. Go ahead, Commissioner Nikita.
Yeah, the issue at hand is whether we want to bring this back for further discussion. That, if that's the case, it seems like getting clarity for everyone to understand what the ordinances that we have in place are and what they consist of and the extent of what they are is probably the first step. That would be something that I suppose would be needed given the concerns and questions that seem to have come up a number of times. So I would say that likely this needs to be reviewed further, which would start with an update and education on exactly what we have, which we have an extensive series of ordinances that have been, I think, been stated that there are a number of ordinances in a number of different areas that address landscape noises from landscapers, things like that, people working on their homes, obviously construction. There's concerns about noise relative to traffic, Woodward Avenue and such. And we have a number of ordinances that address all that. Whether they need to be refined, maybe the decibel reading needs to be addressed somehow, possibly the timing or when they start or when they're enforced, they should be enforced. Maybe there's a question on the enforcement of some of those. I think that those are all things that may need to be addressed. But I think from what I understand and we've been part of creating ordinances, noise ordinances over the years, that there's actually quite a few things in place. And maybe it's a matter of recognizing and understanding what we have. So I would say this is probably due for a full staff presentation of what we have in place and then identify where there may be gaps to address. Or, of course, one of the things that we also have to take in consideration is that there are certain circumstances which we have little to do. We have few opportunities to actually address, which is some of the noise ordinances that we can't control, that based on any kind of designation to enforce, that it's very difficult to do. And what I'm getting at is some of the noise ordinances on Woodward Avenue, which we've had a number of complaints about, but we have to recognize that some of those are very, very difficult and out of our hands to actually control by way of the way they're monitored and what the legal rights are and the ability for us to enforce. So there are a number of different questions, I think. Maybe there's some confusion, maybe there's a misunderstanding, and maybe there's a lack of recognition of all those. And that starting with, as I think the manager said, bringing all that to clarity is probably the first step, which would require staff to bring it to us.
Thank you, Commissioner Nikita. Commissioner Hoff, go ahead.
Isn't this what we got tonight? I thought we got a sample of all of the ordinances, the current ordinances from chapter 26, 50, 74, and 126 that pertain to noise. What else do we want? They're written out for us, the ordinances. It seems to me that then we would take this material that we got and those commissioners that have concerns about certain ones would bring it forward. That's what I think. I think we got all the background information. The next step is, what are the concerns? Because as our manager said, once we get the concerns, then we can address them. But I think for tonight, that Jana and her department did a great job in compiling them all. Or is there some thought that there are some others than what we received?
That would be my question, Commissioner Hoff, to Ms. Ecker. Is this a complete list of our noise ordinances?
To the best of my knowledge, it is, and that includes a computer search for the term noise in all of the electronic documents of our city code. So I believe it is.
Then Commissioner Hoff was right on, point well taken, and I believe that either give directions to pretty much if any commissioner has any clarity on what ordinance he inquires any clarification, and that's the direction. Otherwise, we need to move on if there's no meaningful desire to bring it back. We need to move on. Commissioner Host.
Well, hey, I'll give Jana two things in this, and that is we don't mention drums, which drums can be the background for lots of very noisy things. And then you were kind enough, Jana, to mention duration of noise. The fact that we have a sound meter and can actually use it is wonderful. Which is the biggest one, is we don't have a vehicular noise ordinance. And as such, I think we should to just augment whatever our police are allowed to do.
Commissioner Baller.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to specifics, and I appreciate Joe's pushing us in that direction. So the things I would be looking at, first of all, I'd be interested in a very general sense of what some other communities do. We seem to be very fragmented. We don't have a single sort of policy statement about noise. I wonder what we make exceptions. So we allow chainsaws and other power equipment, blowers, but we don't. That doesn't seem to recognize that possibly technology has allowed those things to be a little bit quieter. We don't promulgate any regulations. We allow it to be used for any duration. So if somebody has a big yard and they want to remove every blade of cut grass, they can be out there blowing for 6 hours. So the specific noises that get under my skin are Woodward and blowers, and occasionally other power equipment. And I know that some people are concerned about construction noise, but so those would be my specifics. And then the other thing I would want to know is, what do other communities do? Is there a way to consolidate this? And is there some way to either promulgate the regulations, more vigorously enforce them? I know that a lot of our trades have to have either licenses or permits or whatever to do what they do. Maybe you need a permit to make a lot of noise. I don't know. I'd like to explore it further. Most definitely.
Great. So Valentine, is that clear directions to move on to our next item? Should you request any question or any clarification? Go ahead.
No, I think based on the feedback with the specific areas that have been identified, that's helpful in coming back to you with some further detail. Thank you. Commissioner Hoff.
Commissioner Hoff, go ahead, please.
I would also think that it would be important to have some kind of record of the complaints about noise. I know there were many at the time of this summer, and we addressed it. In my mind, we tried. I think that the city sent a letter to Lansing requesting some input on this, and that it was a problem, the noise on Woodward from vehicles. But it would be important to me, before we go through a lot of research into this, to find out just what kind of complaints has been coming forward. Do the police go out on a lot of noise complaints? Does code enforcement go out on a lot of noise complaints? And I'm not aware of that. I think, as Janice said, there have been some where they have gone out, but I'm not hearing that this is a community-wide problem.
Commissioner Nikita, go ahead.
Yeah, and based on that, I would also say that I think the majority of the issues that we've heard over the years are really relative to time. 7 a.m. in the morning on a weekend or something like that, or 11 o'clock at night when somebody's doing something. I think really it comes down to really the time oftentimes. And then I think some of the restrictions that may not be clear as to what we can do about it, which is, I think Commissioner Hoff's bringing up the issue that we had earlier in the summer this year when there were a number of complaints about the cars and the loud car situations. I think that if we're going to talk about that, we have to start with the requirements and the legal realities of what we have in place and what we can enforce or can't enforce, because I think there are a lot of gaps in the facts of what we can control and what we can't control, which, in summary to that point is when a car is moving and there's really no way for us to identify how many decibels it is when it may be combined with multiple cars and it's a moving target. And even if we're standing there with a decibel reader, a meter, then it's very difficult to do that. Therefore, how can we enforce that? I think the realities of the legal issue, and maybe it's something that we can get further clarity. We already had some this summer, but from Mark, from me, Mr. Clemens, and his concerns about how we can actually address that legally. So there are a number of overall, I think, questions of what we can and can't do. And I think, frankly, when it comes to construction and things in the neighborhood, has a lot to do with the times that they take place. So it may not be the decibels. It's really oftentimes the complaints, I think, come with too early or too late, oftentimes. So that's where I would start with those fundamentals, because that seems to be at the root of where the concerns are, and then recognize what our parameters are, and then move forward with whatever we may be able to do.
Commissioner Sherman?
So one other thing one thing that was raised was talking about the blowers. Maybe we can look at what other communities have done with regard to lawn services and whether it's a particular days that they're allowed to be cutting the lawns or doing that work to increase the number of days where there isn't that disturbance to the residents. I don't know what other neighborhoods or what other cities have done in that respect, but we also have to be careful of trampling on individual rights in that area. If someone wants to clear their own, telling them when and how they can do it may be problematic. So we have to be very careful as we go through here.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Long, go ahead with your comment, please.
Yes.
As we know, to remind everybody, this is more not to discuss in details what we want to do. It's more to give directions. What's the next step? But go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem, as I'll give you the last comment on this, please.
Thank you. Taking into consideration all of the remarks from all the commissioners, I think it would be important not only to look at what other communities have as far as as ordinances, but to ask them some questions about enforcement. About, yes, you have this fabulous ordinance in Ann Arbor, but is it enforceable? Do you try to enforce it? What is the outcome then of your ordinance?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Long. I think we have a clear directions to our city manager, and I believe the consensus here from the majority is it's worth to further discuss it with the directions noted earlier. With that, we can move to our next item on the agenda, which is commission discussion on items from prior meeting. And item one, under that item, we have commissioner report request. And that was initiated by Commissioner Stuart Sherman, I believe. Commissioner Sherman, I will give you the floor on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And actually, the last discussion and how that got there is a perfect example of how we should be doing this versus going behind the scenes and asking staff to to prepare certain types of reports or certain types of materials that are time consuming for our staff. This was brought through the process that we just established, where Commissioner Host requested that we look at the noise ordinances. Ms. Ecker provided us with the information. We were able to then discuss it as a commission. An example of my concern is that report that we received from the police department at the last meeting. That was the information, I believe, was requested by Commissioner Ballard behind the scenes. And as I understand it, that report took a considerable amount of staff time. And the staff is not our personal commodity. Staff works for the city. They work for our residents. And allocating that for that type of project without coming to the commission and asking for staff to do that is a concern. We're supposed to be open and transparent. Let's be open and transparent with it.
Okay, Commissioner Sherman? Did that include your comment, Mr. Sherman, as no further directions to move forward with this pretty much?
Well, it is to move, I think there should be a policy that if we're going to request something that takes more than a certain period of time, certain amount of staff time, that it has to come to the commission through our items for future discussion.
Don't we already have that, Commissioner Sherman? That's what we do every night?
No, what I'm suggesting is that is the way that we gather information, not just going to city staff and asking for an extensive review of something that takes hours and hours of staff's time. It's not the purpose of staff.
Okay. Any feedback from the commissioners on that? Commissioner Host?
Yeah, would you, Mr. Mayor, be kind enough to ask Commissioner Sherman if there are rules and procedures on seeking information, and as such, the intimation is that we go directly to staff, and I want to say we go directly to our city manager and have our city manager disseminate whatever information is needed. And I would hope that the city manager would say, this is going to take too much time, or be decent enough to say, this is something we really don't want to do. In defense of Commissioner Ballard's asking staff, and I assume it was Joe, I have a problem with the word staff. We truly, as a community and as residents, really deserve to know the breakdown of all the encounters with our police to see how well we're doing. That's all.
Thank you. Further, Commissioner Hoff?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Sherman's point is not that the community doesn't deserve to know, but that the commission is in the position to request this kind of information, that it's the commission's consensus, a decision made by this commission on what kind of information we need to move forward on whatever it might be, such as the noise ordinance. We needed a compilation of all of the ordinances that pertain to noise. Now, we all have it in front of us, and those who have a concern can express it. And it's expressed openly and it comes from the commission rather than an individual seeking information for whatever reason. We don't know what the reason is why a particular individual wants an extensive report, but if it comes from the commission, it's an indication that there's a consensus from the people who have been elected to be leaders in this community that they want that information.
Commissioner Sherman.
And that's exactly the point. We are here, we speak as a consensus. There have to be 4 votes for anything to move forward. Individually, we don't have the authority to do anything. So it shouldn't be any different here.
Thank you, Commissioner Baller. I apologize. I missed your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's clarify. I did not ask for that information from the city manager or the chief of police. I asked if that information was kept. It was their decision. I assume, given the political climate and concerns nationwide about policing, it was their decision to come up with that material. I heard no complaints from anyone on the city staff about how much time it took. I've heard no report about how much time it took. Commissioner Sherman is acting as a proxy for the staff. The staff has made no assertions that this was an unwarranted request. I, again, did not request that that data be produced. I asked if it existed. And I asked if it existed in approximately December of 2019. Okay? And after the George Floyd incident, I renewed my inquiry about whether that material existed by saying, by accepting an invitation to discuss it further. The report that ended up in our packets was a complete surprise to me, and it was provided to all commissioners at the same time. And so that's the extent of my comment on this, on that specific incident. On your suggestion that city staff should not provide information to individual commissioners, I vehemently disagree with that. We are each elected individually to represent our community and to act in an oversight role. And if there were genuine abuses of this, I could understand Commissioner Sherman's concern. But I don't think his concern has been legitimized by the city manager. And I think it would cause an undue hardship on commissioners and an embarrassment, because it would force commissioners to file freedom of information requests to get basic information out of the city. So, and I'm happy to do so, if that's what it takes to get the information that I need to provide oversight of the administration. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Baller. Commissioner Sherman, go ahead.
I'm very sorry that Commissioner Baller is taking this so personally. But the issue is not, as he has tried to phrase it, the issue is utilization of extensive staff time for information that should go to the commission if you want to report, similar to what Commissioner Host did. And I think that is the right way to do it. If you have an issue, you bring it forward. And if the commission, and again, yes, you are an elected official. However, you are one of 7. This is not like you have a district, you represent the same 20,000 people, all of them. And the idea is to have a discussion as to whether that is we're going to spend 50 hours of staff time. I think the public has a reason that they should be able to know that the information is utilized by the commission.
Commissioner Host?
If something's important enough to one of the 7 commissioners, I am confident that it is important enough to the other 6. That's it.
Then why wouldn't it be brought forward to all?
Yeah, let me interject if you may allow me, please, gentlemen here, commissioners. Let's not take this into a personal, this said that, this said so. I believe what we're asking here collectively, as I understood, is transparency. And I believe we have a city commissioner should request something from the city manager, could be done collectively. That's what Commissioner Sherman is referring to. Doesn't have to be a policy. If you are a true leader of this community, and you are inquiring on an important matter of the city, I do believe always you have to be transparent about that inquiry. That's what we're talking about here. The transparency can come through many different ways. It can come through a public meeting like tonight and addressed through your next future discussion item. It could come, something could not wait to a meeting. Something could generated by an email requesting this issue to be brought to the commission by one commissioner, but we're all copied in it. But we have to respect that we cannot form a forum and a discussion. Further, it's only the city manager responding to all of us. I believe that we're speaking the same language. I don't believe, Commissioner Sherman, that he's referring to really now create a policy to educate leaders like us on how to bring an issue or a matter or situation to our staff. It's just be respectful of their time, be respectful of how to be transparent, and I think we should move on with this item. I really don't believe we need to discuss this further. That's me personally. But I want to make sure the point is as well taken by other commissioners. I want to make sure that this is exactly what we're talking about. Commissioner Nikita?
Yes, you used the word transparency a number of times. I think that's exactly the issue at hand. If there's information that needs to be pulled together for the purpose of any commissioner or the commission in general to understand so that we can make any kind of judgment on it, that should be a question brought up at the commission level and discussed at the commission level and directed to the city manager at a commission level. This isn't one time over the last few months. It's happened a number of times. I think there was a request for some property information from Oakland County, referencing averages to Oakland County and the city. There were a number of different other requests that have come through that I recall seeing emails after the fact. And the question comes up when you come to transparency is, what is the purpose of gathering this information? What are we trying to identify? What is the goal here? And the commission should make that decision, and the direction should be given to the city manager. One individual commissioner contacting the city manager and requesting a particular bit of information without necessarily knowing what the goal is not it's not the appropriate way to handle gathering of information and directing the city manager and the staff to move forward. So I think the request is simple, and it's based on the fact that over the last few months, there have been a number of requests by individual commissioners to the manager that we've seen through just basically emails sent after the fact. And I think the question is, what is the purpose of some of this information? What are we gathering it for? And what is the issue that needs to be addressed? So those are questions I've had with the area, and this is not just one item. This has been multiple items. So I think the question really comes down to, or the point comes down to, is moving forward. And if we want to make a policy out of this, we can bring it back and have a discussion about a particular policy. But I think the bottom line is, if there's something that you want to have information about, whether it's our property values relative to Oakland County's or whatever it happens to be, then bring it up at commissioner meeting, exposed and discussed in public. And then if we all agree then the city manager can proceed in gathering the appropriate information and presenting the information accordingly so we can make a determination of whether or not we can achieve whatever the issue has to be to address the issue. And that, I think, is at the root of the question that Commissioner Sherman is bringing up.
Great. I guess we can move on and just agreeing that hopefully that we all agree on transparency. And this is pretty much the conclusion of this. I believe also that every request by any commissioner, just for the record, had been shared by our city manager to the rest of the commissioners. So, but I believe there's merit to the conversation here. It's the process. It's how to ask for information, and most importantly, to be transparent. And with that, I think we move to item 2 under zoning. And that was brought up by Commissioner Nikita. And I believe Commissioner Nikita just
It wasn't brought up by me.
It was.
Yeah, it was. And that was, and we had in our agenda actually under city staff report from our planning director, Ms. Ecker. We have, if you look at the city staff report, the memo from Ms. Ecker in regards to the O2 and B2 zoning district.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking it was a question that Commissioner Host brought up before, but you're right. Yeah.
Yes. And Mr. Commissioner Nikita, not sure if you want to comment and further give some directions of what you're looking for after you receive the report, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking it was another question that Commissioner Host brought up before, but yeah, we're referring to the O2 B questions in the perimeter of the transitional zoning areas. So I think the only question I would have is whether or not that we need to recognize the potential deficiencies in these areas and whether or not that needs to be looked at better to a further level. I think the question, and I believe Jana had commented on it last time we brought this up briefly, was that, and I believe it's in the report as well, that the O2 and B in a couple of areas, specifically the area we're talking about, which is at Lincoln and Adams, is was for some reason, and I believe if I remember correctly, Ms. Ecker didn't actually know why it was omitted or not actually incorporated in the transitional zoning. So I think just the question is really whether or not we feel like that gap and any other similar gap that may have been overlooked when we got into the traditional zoning discussion needs to then be followed up with, with putting that, I guess, back into the discussion at the planning board and whether or not that should be addressed more clearly. It seems like there's just some uses that may or may not be included and may be considered. And in other parts where transitional zoning is happening, around the perimeter of the downtown and the commercial district, that has been addressed. And in this particular area and a couple of areas it hasn't. So I suppose for further discussion, I reviewed what Jana had put together, but I guess I'm not convinced whether or not there's an agreement or there's been clarity. There's been a feeling that we should pursue further clarity. And I think that's the question that Jana put forth. So maybe we need to discuss that further. I guess I feel if there continues to be lack of clarity as to what should go in there based on some of the adjacencies and what's been done in some of the other areas as far as changing the zoning from B or O to TZ, is that whether this should be looked at as well. And I know that TZ's been looked at extensively, and I'm familiar with the fatigue that the planning board has dealt with, but we're also dealing with property owners and people that have to figure out how to use our zoning for their purposes. And the question is whether or not we've done as good of a job as we can to clarify and enhance those zoning areas as much as possible.
Commissioner Hop, go ahead, please.
When we were implementing transitional zoning, we had zoning maps with drawn out with the colors indicating which areas we were looking at. We eliminated some of those areas from consideration. So if we move further on this, I would need a zoning map of, not of the entire city, of the areas that we're discussing, because I'm not clear on which areas we're talking about.
Good point, Commissioner Hoff. I believe Ms. Acker, oh yeah, she's here, still with us. I think Ms. Acker, I think Commissioner Nikita made it clear, and I do echo that maybe further discussion on this is important, as we have a situation came in front of us where a establishment in our city were unable to accomplish what they need because of the ordinance and the zoning. And we just want to make sure, exactly as also Commissioner Hoff stated, what are these exact areas? Where does it go? From what mile to what mile exactly? Who fills in that zoning itself? And let's maybe take a look at this, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to maybe revise it, maybe change it, maybe edit it. But I think it's worth take another look at this further in depth. Would you like to comment on something, Ms. Eckert?
Well, I just wanted to say that there are numerous properties throughout the city that are zoned O2. The ones in particular that Mr. Denha owns that he's referring to are at Lincoln and Adams, the plaza where the bagel shop used to be. And then he also owns some up on North Old Woodward. I know why the North Old Woodward ones weren't considered for transitional zoning, and that's because they're in the downtown overlay district. So they weren't in an ambiguous area. They were already under the overlay regulations. There are also a lot of B and O2 properties in the Triangle District. Many of those were also not considered because they're specifically covered by the Triangle District overlay and the additional things that are allowed to go on there. So this particular issue, primarily with regards to the sale of alcoholic liquors for off-premise consumption at Lincoln and Adams, the issue is they're outside of the Triangle District, because if they were inside the Triangle District, they could have a restaurant that served alcohol, but they still couldn't have off-premise consumption sale of alcohol. So you can't, if you're a supermarket or you're Kroger, our ordinance says that you can go into the supermarket, you can buy packaged liquor, take it home and drink it. That's not permitted in O2. I don't know why that was originally done, except to speculate. But that's the reason. And then there's additional things in place in the different overlays that might allow it or make it a little more flexible, but that particular property is not in an overlay of any kind.
That would give us a good reason. Thank you, Ms. Acker, for the explanation. I'm not sure how many other owners were not specifically doing it for an individual. It could be he will sell tomorrow, another individual buy it, right? Or whatever the reason is. It's more of what fits that community. And I believe, let's say, for example, don't want to speak specifically of that establishment. That's the reason we're discussing, because it came in front of us, and it just enlightened us to further discuss this. I'm like, it was in the master plan, as we're discussing right now, when Duwani had said, I want to replicate the plaza that on Maple and Chesterfield to be on Maple and Eaton, to be on every community that we could. And that's an example of it. Could be, again. I'm not, saying we should do it, but it could be a great opportunity to see some areas that have been ignored or forgotten about, or we did not include it in our zoning changes. That it's an opportunity for us to discuss it. Commissioner Sherman.
I just want to point out that when we did, it wasn't that long ago that we looked at the zoning in the O2 and the O1 that's now become some of the transitional zoning areas. And some of these uses were looked at that time, and they were decided against it may be worthwhile to go back and look at those uses again to determine whether they would fit in now into those zoning based on what else has occurred. Nothing, there's no harm in doing that.
So we're all speaking the same language, I think. Do we have a mostly consensus from the commissioner and directions to Jenna? Jenna, are we clear what we're doing? Oh, Commissioner Nikita, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, and I do think that it should take a look. I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jana, please. I surely don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do recall that you said that you weren't sure why this area was omitted, that it wasn't included in the transitional zoning for some reason, and I believe that's what I recall you saying. But again, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you said. But
I think I said I couldn't remember, and I'd have to go back and look.
Okay, so something to that effect. So I think that there was lack of clarity as to whether or not it was fully addressed. I was thinking that it hadn't been for some reason, and we don't know why. Maybe it was, but wait, maybe it wasn't. We don't know that. The only thing I would say is relative to this issue of liquor on-site or off-site, the one thing that sort of puts a question in this for me is that a block away at Primo's Pizza that they sell liquor off-site, and then as well ML, which is just a couple blocks to the south. So this is the inconsistencies that we have there, and it just, to me, it deserves to take a look at it and then see where we best find it to fit. So
All right.
I'm in favor of taking a look at it further and having a planning board put it in their agenda in the
Thank you,
future.
Commissioner Nikita. Is there any objection on this from any commissioners to bring it back to further discuss it? I don't see any.
It doesn't sound like it would need to come back to us. It really, this is something that would go to the planning board.
That's my next point is I don't see any objection. We don't need further discussion on this. Jenna, are we clear on the directions moving forward? Ms. Ecker?
Let me just suggest.
Mr. Valentine would like to suggest something. Go ahead, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms of process, I think the stage we're in, we have this three-step process of advancing items for commission discussion and then direction. I think right now we're in stage 2 of that process. And I think if you wanted to provide direction to the planning board, I think we would need to bring it back to at the next commission meeting or a subsequent commission meeting to have you provide that direction in consistency with the process that we've established. So I would just say that I think there's clarity in terms of the direction we go, but in formality with the process that we've established for addressing these items, we should probably bring it back and have it as an agenda item for you to provide that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine, for refreshing our memory on the process on that, as we respect that, and you are absolutely right. So with that, I think we're all clear on what next to be done on the next item. Thank you. Now we can move to item E under new business, which is a commission items for future discussion. Do we have any commission items, comments for future discussion? Wow. See none. I like that. We can move to item G. We have a resolution to meet in closed session. And
so moved.
to believe that there would be no action taken under this closed session. Commissioner Host, do you have a question?
No.
You're muted.
Second. Oh.
Are you
I
making
made a motion and he seconded it.
I second Commissioner Sherman's motion.
I'm sorry, I missed the whole thing. I think we went blank for a second. Did somebody made a motion?
I made a motion and Commissioner Host seconded it.
All right. We have a motion to move in the closed session, was seconded by Commissioner Host. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Nikita?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Law?
Yes.
Commissioner Baylor?
Yes.
Mayor Boutros?
Yes. We move on to item 8, remove from consent agenda. We have none. Communications, we have none. Reports, commission reports, of intent to appoint to planning board, multimodal transportation board, Birmingham Shopping District, Parks and Rec Board. Many boards, if you're interested. Now, under reports, item B, commissioner comments. Commissioner Hoff, please go ahead with your comment.
I have a comment and a question. First, I'd like to comment that we haven't had a meeting since the Greenwood Cemetery tour. And I went on it and there were about between 40 and 50 people on the tour. And it was led by Linda Buchanan and George Getchman, who are both active as friends of the museum. And it was very, very interesting. They did a great job. It was a beautiful day. And when they do this again, I just highly recommend it. It's very informative. And we're so very fortunate to have such a significant historical cemetery right here in Birmingham. That's my comment. And my question is, what is going to happen with the workshop scheduled between the commission and the planning board that was supposed to take place tonight, but we moved our meeting to tonight? So will that be rescheduled, or just will we wait until the next time, next spring?
My understanding it's rescheduled, Commissioner Hobb, but I'm gonna, but it's, I think, the pleasure of the commission to postpone it to a certain date.
Well, were you going to give us the date?
We will provide you with some dates. Well, and let me have Joe answer that question on more clarity. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, unfortunately, our schedule has got a little thrown off here with everything that's transpired recently. And I think with the meetings that I think we're going to be looking at going forward with the manager search, I was going to kind of see how this smoothed out before we proposed any future dates. Clearly, you know, the ability to meet with the planning board is at your discretion. But I thought at the present time, there's probably more pressing matters in the immediate future. However, you know, if you want to move ahead quickly with that, we can get that rescheduled in the near future here. So if there's comments from the commission, I'd be happy to hear those.
I would think it depends on what we have to discuss. If everything is moving along, we have already approved an action list for the planning board. So if it's moving along, I don't see that there's any need for a workshop with the planning board. But if there are some issues that I'm not aware of, or perhaps the master plan, we have to discuss that, or give some prioritize the master plan and other things that are happening, because things are being shifted around a little due to the fact of the virus and the virtual meetings. So we're in a little bit of a unique situation. Maybe we don't need that workshop because they do have their action list. But I'm open to hearing, are there things that we have to discuss with the planning board?
So to best answer that, I just advise that the two items we had planned for the discussion between the planning board and the city commission were an update on the master plan process, and then a discussion on the North Old Woodward area discussion. So we've had some requests to bring that back, and that would have been the second topic for conversation. So if you want to move those ahead, we can certainly work on getting some dates scheduled. If you want to include that as part of a long-range planning discussion, we can do that. If you want to, you know, forego it, we can do that too. It's really at your pleasure.
Commissioner Host.
We were going to be discussing the first draft or the second draft. However, based on the planning board's situation in November and December, where they only have one meeting each month, chances are the 2040 plan has been put on a form of hiatus until after the first of the year. And the urgency, to my mind, is not there to do this immediately because, thanks to COVID, they've been moved back themselves.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Commissioners? Do we kind of agree with Commissioner Hoff and host, Commissioner Sherman?
Totally different topics. I'll let you finish this first.
Okay. So then Commissioner Hoff, we're pretty much tabling this till something come up, as there's no urgency.
Indefinitely.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, unless there's a must to it, but we don't see any need for it right now.
Fine.
Yeah. Commissioner Sherman, you have another comment?
I do. I just wanted to make mention of a program that I participated with the fire department a couple weeks ago. It's called Fire Ops 101, where I had the opportunity to get fitted and participate in service with the fire department in training. It was extremely interesting. It was very physically demanding. It's really incredible the amount of weight that these guys are carrying when they go into a dangerous situation, between the turnout gear and the breathing apparatus and what they do. Having an opportunity to watch our firefighters as they taught the section on vehicle extraction was very exciting, actually. We have some very talented individuals in our fire department. We are very fortunate to have them. They are well trained, and their service, having gone through that, I appreciate their service even more. I would especially like to thank Chief Wells, who was my, I guess my guardian angel as I went through this. He was responsible for making sure I got through it safely. So he did a great job, and I really appreciated the opportunity, and I'd strongly recommend that if you haven't done it, and I don't think anyone else has, it's a great opportunity to see what the fire department does and really experience what they go through, not necessarily on a day-to-day, but, well, one of the things was actually an emergency run. So that is something that they deal with on a day-to-day, a medical run. I would highly recommend it when it's when you get the memo next year. It's definitely worth the time, and it was quite an experience.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. Well noted, and I hope you were able to finish at least one task when you were there, even with the help. All right. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Host.
Versus having a commission item for future discussion, I didn't make a motion, but I want to throw this out to you. Thanks to the COVID and thanks to more and more people being stuck in their homes, life is going to change. Our 2040 plan is going to change, but also the opportunities for our citizens to rent their houses out and pay for their taxes is going to become an increasing rental problem. And I'm referring to VBRO, HomeAway, Airbnb, you name it. If you look at our rental laws, ordinances, they do not really work with short-term rentals. And as such, we should address it before it becomes a problem in any neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner Host. Any other commission comments? Seeing none? Nikita, you have a comment?
No, I'm trying to fix my my cord here. Sorry.
Yeah, your hand is on the screen.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, we move on to advisory boards, committees, commission reports and agendas, legislation, city staff. I mentioned that earlier, that we received the memo from our planning director, Jenna Eckert, in regards to the O2 and B2 zoning districts. With that, we will reconvene. We'll go to a closed session. And as I mentioned, there would not be an action taken on that. And we shall see you. We'll recess into closed session.
Thanks,
I didn't want to get left behind. It's really cold in that other room.
Here we go. Commissioners, okay, we got plenty. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, everybody. All right. Thank you so much. Productive meeting, I hope. And meeting adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Yeah, good night, everybody. Bye-bye. Enjoy where you at, Mark.
Thanks.
Yeah.